Good morning and good afternoon to everyone. Welcome to Global Compliance Panel's live webinar on Medical Device Adverse Event Reporting Systems in EU, US, and Canada. My name is Sam, and I'll be hosting today's session. On behalf of the Global Compliance Panel team, I would like to thank you for being part of this event. Today's webinar will be presented by Dr. David Lim. Dr. Lim obtained his PhD in Biological Sciences at the University of Missouri Columbia and published his thesis research in the prestigious journal Science. Since then, Dr. Lim has held various positions at Duke, U.S. National Laboratories, Intrexon Corporation, Terumo, U.S. FDA, CDRH, and Eragen Biosciences Inc., a Luminex company. In 2009, Dr. Lim served as a member during the FDA's Transparency Public Meeting. Prior to founding his own consulting firm, www.regulatorydoctor.com, he was Senior Vice President of Scientific and Regulatory Affairs at Aquavit Pharmaceuticals Incorporation in New York, wherein Dr. Lim provided inspiring and actionable solutions for sustainable business operation. Dr. Lim, as regulatory doctor, provides practical, actionable, and strategic solutions integrated with emotional intelligence EQ skills for all aspects of global regulatory, quality, clinical, and compliance matters. Over the years, Dr. Lim has analyzed over 1,000 FDA warning letters. He has also attended more than 50 FDA advisory panel meetings and analyzed the subject matters and decision-making process in detail. He is familiar with more than 200 products, medical devices, including IVD products, biologics, drugs, and combination products. He is a certified professional for regulatory affairs and a certified quality auditor by the American Society of Quality. He is an auditor, regulatory coach, consultant, and instructor for global matters pertaining to regulatory affairs and compliance, quality, and clinical affairs. We are honored to have such a distinguished person such as Dr. Lim with us to present this webinar today. Before we begin, I would like to inform you of the program outlined for this training session. This webinar is scheduled for 60 minutes duration. First, Dr. Lim will take you through today's webinar, highlighting the areas that will be covered, and he will then share with you his presentation. We would like to inform you that all participants, once part of the teleconference, have been placed on mute and will remain so until the Q&A begins. It is for the purpose of avoiding discontinuity and for allowing the presenter to speak clearly so that everyone present can take maximum benefit from this webinar. We also request all to hold back your questions until the Q&A window begins. 10 minutes of time will be allotted for the Q&A, during which your questions will be answered. If for any reason you get logged out of this training session or teleconference, please follow the same procedure to join in again. Now that we are all ready to start, I request Dr. Lim to take it from here. Dr. Lim?
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's live webinar. I am David Lim. Today, I will be presenting medical device adverse event reporting systems in EU, US, and Canada. Well, the speaker, in fact, introduced nicely about what I've done before. Just to give you one additional comment that I am one of the authors who developed the medical device regulation online class that's offered through the Regulatory Affairs Professional Society. Disclaimer, this is a general disclaimer for your own review when you get a chance. So today we are going to cover applicable regulation laws that relate to adverse event reporting. We are going to cover some definitions adverse event reporting requirement, EU, Canada, and US, and also some the actual reporting forms that are being used in these countries. And then we are also going to talk about some applicable relevant guidance documents through our discussion and then conclusion. So this is a pretty simplified overview of current regulatory framework for medical devices in EU. Please note here, there is a dotted line like this, and then there is a solid line like that. So solid line, it is a requirement. Dotted line, it is a advisory advice. So you have an option to follow it or not. So let's begin from manufacturer. So manufacturer, if they want to market a medical device in European country, and they must work with notified body because they're the one who access your conformity documentation and issue CE mark, and then you can begin to market your product. During the marketing of your product, if there is some events that's considered to be adverse event, then you have to report to the competent authority. That is a requirement. Now, in the in EU, there are 3 medical device directives that govern all the medical devices. For example, the Directive 90/385/EC, that's active implantable medical device. So please note the 90, that's the EU, 385, that's the section number, and then EEC stands for European Economic Community. So now Directive 93/42/EEC, that's the medical device directive, commonly called MDD. And Directive 98/79/EC, that's in vitro diagnostic medical devices. Some people call it as IVDMD or IVDD, but more people call it as IVDD. But please note here, 90, 93, 98, sometime around this time, the European Economic Community, they decide to drop the E in the middle, and then now they call it commonly as European Community, just EC. A lot of people ask about, what these numbers and funny letters mean. There is a Directive 2007/47/EC that amends MDD and AIMDD. Especially this directive introduced new essential requirements, in particular clinical evaluation and vigilance. And there are a lot of guidance documents listed here that can be used to implement, for example, Directive 2007. For example, the medical device guidance document MEDAP 2.12-1 revision A that was issued March 2012 last year, that provide guidelines on a medical device vigilance system. So I highly recommend you get a chance to look at this guidance document, MEDAP 2.12-1 revision 7. Now, in EU, what is the purpose of serious adverse event reporting? Well, when we talk about serious adverse event reporting, well, commonly call it as AER, that can be done during, requirement is during clinical investigation and also after you place your product on the market. For the purpose of today's webinar, we are going to cover after you place on the market. Now, why is it? Well, it is intended to improve what I'm saying, the requirement for adverse event reporting after placing a product on the market is to improve the protection of health and safety of patients, users, and others by reducing the likelihood. So we are going to review what Health Canada says and also US FDA says. So So when you look at the languages, it is similar, but it's a little different, and it's interesting to know how different they are. Now, regarding post-market surveillance and vigilance for active implantable medical devices, AIMDD, as for surveillance, the applicable axes are listed here. As for vigilance, it's described in Article 8, and then the axis applicable. Now, the difference between surveillance and vigilance is big difference. There is a big difference. Vigilance is a reactive. You receive a report and you have to act. Surveillance is rather proactive. Even without there is an event, you play a due diligence and do some preparation. So basically, the big difference between surveillance and vigilance. Vigilance is reactive. Again, surveillance is proactive, and in fact, vigilance are included part of surveillance. So now you see, how they are different. Again, please note to get how the surveillance and vigilance are enforced. There's a guidance document that we talked about. Please refer to that. It's very important. Now, AIMDD under Annex 245 vigilance, well, basically it says a manufacturer shall make an application for evaluation of his quality system to notify body, and that application must include how manufacturer is going to institute and keep updated a post-market surveillance system. So they, for example, it include what kind of instances that must be included. And I recommend you use the verbatim copy of the language in your procedure, in your SOP for adverse event reporting in European countries. There is a reason why you have to do that, because of mixes of languages, EU, Health Canada, and US. When FDA inspectors come to your facility, they realize that you are not meeting US requirements. Because of that, well, not necessarily just for the inspection. We don't sell the product just for the inspection. We sell the product, for the patients, but we also obligated to meet the requirement, and therefore, to meet the requirement, I recommend you totally separate languages between US requirement, EU requirement, and Health Canada requirement. Post-market requirement, surveillance, and vigilance for medical device directive is listed here, is straightforward. And MDD annexes the language, well, it's similar, but I want to point out the language that you have to consider and implement in your procedure. That is, when you submit your application, you have to use the language systematic procedure. Systematic procedure, it is something that you have your own system, how you evaluate, estimate, and assess, and all the things that you receive any information from anyone, basically. So basically, you should have systematic procedure, and that has to be implemented. That includes you notify the competent authorities. How soon you have to notify? Immediately. Well, the term immediately sounds like a little annoying, to be honest, but how do we interpret the term immediately? Well, what kind of event are listed here? So we are going to define the term immediately a little later, just after we review the post-market requirement. For example, the 9879/EC, that's in vitro diagnostic medical device. So IVDD, surveillance and vigilance are listed here. So now let's look at the definition. So MEDEP 2.12, and this is where you can find the definition. So basically, the authorized representative if you're marketing a product, and corrective action, and then field safety corrective action commonly called FSCA, is synonym for recall. When the weekly or daily and weekly and monthly, this morning I review the field safety notice. Basically, if there is a field safety corrective action FSCA, that has to be communicated to the users and stakeholders through what? That's the field safety notice. So I had a chance to review even this morning that in the European country, for example, UK, MHRA, there is a medical device alert regarding Red 8 pulse oximeter. So basically, this is the how you use. But just to make one comment, please note I say recall here. The term recall, if you look at medical device directive MDD, if you type in the term recall, there are 7 words of recall. However, if you type in correction removal, you don't find any words for that unless you type in corrective action. So correction removal is a U.S. term, but for the purpose of EU and adverse event reporting context, the term that used is recall. But in U.S., the correction removal is part of recall, and we are going to talk about that later. So now definition immediately. Is it immediately mean within an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours? Well, what is it? Well, immediately means without any delay that could not be justified. It could be 1 day, it could be 2 days, or it could be 3 days, depending upon the situation that you are in, given a incident. An incident definition here is straightforward. Indirect harm, especially IVD products, even though there is no direct contact with a patient, and a lot of time there is indirect harm, and the companies get a little frustrated whether we have to report or not. And the manufacturer definition here. Now, the trend reporting by the manufacturer when there is a significant increase in anticipated user error and user. Well, in your labeling, if you foresee potential, anticipated known event, what's anticipated, what is not anticipated, basically unanticipated, I recommend you draw the line and come up with what's anticipated in somewhat detail, because if there is an event that has been anticipated before, then you could be waived, from reporting. So in your labeling, when you develop labeling, it is important what is anticipated and or not. And a lot of companies, I've seen that they believe that user error is not to be reported. No, you are required to report user error. Well, it's depending upon the case, but you have to evaluate each and every case to determine whether it's reportable or not. Now, let's look at criteria, for instance, to be reported. This is very important. I think that a lot of a lot of 483 are issued in the U.S. For failure to have a procedure or for failure to report some instance. And in European country, in Health Canada and US, I recommend you establish criteria which event when we receive we are going to report, which event when we receive we are not going to report. So you need to draw the line and develop criteria. And I get a lot of, sometimes I get a phone call or email, asking me, oh, we got this event, should we report? I provide some advice on that. But anyway, in EU, event listed here, for example, device malfunction, deterioration, and characteristics or performance for IVD, commonly, for example, false positives and false negative. It should have been positive, but then the system or your device produced negative, that's false. So, an unanticipated adverse event or side effects and or inappropriate therapy, degradation, destruction of the device. This morning, the UK MHRA Health Authority issued a medical device alert about oximeter. That oximeter, just when it's moved, it stops. Basically, it turns it off automatically. So that event was communicated through FSN and to the pretty much all the stakeholders. And medical device, and also now please note here number 1, 2, 3. So for you to report, you have to have an event. Second, you have to see whether your device is suspected to be a contributory cause of the incident, whether it's contributory. So now, if you have an incident that you may believe is reportable, but from your evaluation, investigation, and you conclude that, well, our device was not suspected to be a contributory cause, that's how you justify if you believe it's not reportable. And also the third, the event led or might have led to one of the following outcomes. For you to report in EU, all three things must be met. For example, event has to occur, and also your device is suspected to be a contributory cause, or your device led or might have led to one of the following instances: death or serious injury and other things. So if you have received an event and when you evaluate, please use these languages, especially when you justify not to report. For example, after we fully investigate, it was determined the event did not lead or might not have led to the serious injury, whatever. I'm just telling you, use these languages when you justify. Conditions not usually required to report. Well, if a patient found there was some problem prior to its use, or event caused by patient condition, that patient got an implant for orthopedic device, but somehow patient got her implanted device loosened, and she had to go to hospital and to revise. However, at that time, the doctor realized that she has extreme level of osteolysis, health condition, and therefore that was the cause. If that is the case, then it was the patient condition that required the revision, for example, orthopedic implant. So if that's the case, then you can justify not to report. And service of life or shelf life of the medical device exceeded. Well, if your device shelf life is two years, and a patient was using more than 3 years and had some problems, well, then that's exceeded your device shelf life or service life. And also there's a couple of other examples here. Now, vigilance system. We talk about the vigilance system. It is your reactive system that's required, and this is the general principle and also requirement for your own review. Now, when you do report, you need to submit follow-up or final report, or you can combine initial report and final report just to make one report and other things. But the question is, what if there is an event that happened outside the European countries? Well, here's what I recommend you do. Well, for example, if incident happened outside the European Economic Community, that includes Switzerland and Turkey. The question is, in those countries outside the European Economic Communities, what have you done there? So depending upon whether the action was taken or not, you decide whether to report. So now IVD manufacturers is straightforward here. Now let's talk about national competent authorities. When we talk about the simple overview of the regulatory scheme in EU, we talk about competent authorities, and they are the one who monitor the investigation of the instance, and they are the one who take any necessary action, and they are the one who disseminate any information, and they are the one who encourage the report of instance and like that. Now here's the manufacturer's instance report form to the competent authorities. So to which National Competent Authority (NCA) of this report being sent to, date of the event, reference number assigned by the manufacturer. And please note here is this initial report, follow-up report, final report, and then you provide the information that relate to it. So now in that instant report, there is a competent authority information that we talk about, and then this is the key information where you want to make sure to provide medical device information if it's applicable, GMDA nomenclature, or your model catalog number, software version number, implant explant date, and other things. And patient information, healthcare facility, and regarding instant, let's look at what information you provide. This is somewhat sensitive area. A lot of companies, when I train the on-site, they hesitate to describe in full. But for the purpose of the adverse event reporting, please note this is very important. If they could be or they might be a litigation against the product liability, this kind of instant report is disclosable. Therefore, you want to make sure what you submit is consistent with what you are going to say later. So I usually say, do it when you do any regulatory or quality work, do it as if it will be litigated at some point of time, so that you know the information you are putting into in this kind of documentation has to be very consistent. Now, instant information, user facility, manufacturer awareness date, and instant description narrative. This instant description narrative is somewhat sensitive. A regulatory manager drafted nicely about what happened, and then the VP of the quality or whoever review and realize that that language just shouldn't be written the way it was written, and then completely changed. And then some other person review it. This is not what happened, and this is not accurate or something. But so this is somewhat sensitive area that I've seen. But as I said, do it as if it will be litigated at some point, and so you want to make sure your description is within the accuracy. And operate of the medical device, and also usage of the medical device. For example, we cover that if problem found prior to use, it is now reportable. But some companies do report. In fact, in the instant report form, it has a problem noted prior use. If you want to be very conservative, then you can still, you may elect to report even if the instant was something identified prior to use. So manufacturers instant report to competent authorities listed here, additional information, what countries and things, and also remedial action, corrective action, preventive action, the safety corrective action. Now, let's say it happened in Canada, you report to the United States, you also report to the EU country because it's the same product, and then it's the same issues and same problems. Now you report to EU as if there's no problem. You report to Health Canada, there's a little problem. You do not report to US. And then if there is a litigation going on, what's going to happen? Well, basically, you did not report even if you knew and had reason to know the problems. Now, how to meet the essential requirement just for the reporting purposes, I recommend, this is my own recommended guidance per se. Use current, accurate, and complete information. Well, complete can be interchangeably used. Comprehensive information in a systematic, integrated manner. I call it CACSWay. So determine requirement that falls under which directive, what type of device. Use harmonized standard and other standard and guidance document, for example, MEDEV or formal GHTF documents, especially national laws and regulations. Get familiar with the changes. If there is any amendment, any new implementation, and if there is a problem, consult with the notified body and competent authorities and try to address all the requirements that are applicable. references in this slide. Now let's move to Canada. Canada is the second largest country, and there is a Health Canada. It's the federal government. Under Health Canada, there is a branches, offices, and bureaus. What we are dealing with is Health Products and Food Branch, HPFB. In Canada, laws and regulation for medical devices, well, there is a Food Drugs Act, and then there is an implementing regulation, that is Canadian Medical Device Regulation. We commonly call it as CMDR. And then the recently amended January 18 last year. Please note that in the U.S. Consumer Packaging Labeling Act applies to medical device or drugs, but in Canada, for medical device or drugs, this act does not apply to any product that is a device or drug within the meaning of Food and Drugs Act. So there are some differences. Now, Canadian medical device regulation is applicable for the sale, advertising for sale, importation for sale, for use on individuals, but it does not apply to importation for personal use. In Health Canada, there are 4-tier device classification. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, depending upon the risk. Regarding mandatory problem reporting, that's under CMDR Section 59. So manufacturer and importer requirement is stated here. Please note that no requirement to report an incident outside Canada. Exception applies. What if incident happen in US? Well, that's clearly outside of Canada. What if you have taken some action with the FDA, or if FDA requests you some information? If that is the case, you are still required to report in Canada. Now, the purpose of the mandatory reporting problem in Canada, it is intended to improve monitoring, to reduce the recurrence of incidents related to the medical devices. Well, basically, that's to ensure the risk to the Canadian population. But this CMDR section is applicable to both the products on the market and also during medical device clinical trial. Regarding medical device clinical trial, serious adverse event reporting requirement, that is under CMDR Part 3, Section 88. Now let's look at the Canadian guidance for mandatory medical device problem reporting. That's this guidance, but please note that Health Canada's implementation of mandatory problem reporting is very similar to GHTF guidance document. Although the GHTF is no longer available, but the older guidance documents are still provided through IMDR, International Medical Device Regulators Forum. So now let's look at the guidance document. In that guidance document, the scope is to aid in the interpretation of the mandatory problem reporting requirements and the definition, corrective action, malfunction, deterioration, manufacture. I recommend you read and try to understand, and so that you can implement Canadian requirement independent of EU requirement and US requirement. If you decide to mix, I am not going to make it independent. We are still going to mix it. If you mix it, please make sure you meet the US requirement clearly. So what is reportable in Canada? Well, any incident involving a medical device that's sold in Canada, when the incident occurs within or outside Canada, an incident that relates to a failure of the device or deterioration or inadequacy in its labeling, direction for use, then please note the language here. Event that has led to the death or serious deterioration, or could do so if it were to recall. Please note how you make a judgment about recurrence. A lot of companies believe that well, it happened, but the chance to see, the same recurrence is 1 out of a billion or 1 out of a million, and then 1 month later they have the same problem. Within a month they have the same problem 3 times. So now what I recommend to interpret and implement in your organization is that if there is an event that has occurred, then you need to presume that it will recur unless the same issue never happened for the past 2 years, for example. That's how US FDA recommend, and that's how you want to consider you interpret. For example, even if it happened once, you presume it will recur. So examples of reportable instance in Canada is listed here. Is pretty straightforward. Just to review one case, premature revision. Let's say a patient got a surgery for whatever surgery, and it should be okay, but somehow he or she had a excruciating pain, and went to see a doctor, and doctor realized that there is a problem, and he or she had to perform surgery again to revise. Well, if that's the case, unless there is a patient symptom that could justify the events, then it's reportable, because that's premature revision. That's not what was intended, and according to your indication for use or user manual. So multiple instance with the same device, this is straightforward. Well, basically, when there is a multiple event, one or more patients are involved on a same or different days, you report separately. But, for IVD product, you collected, 1,000 blood, 100 today, and then another 100 tomorrow, and then, another 100 1 week later, and then 2 weeks later, you test all the blood in one, test system. Well, if that's the case, you report as single instance, because your IVD diagnostic kit, the same diagnostic kit was used to test all 1,000 blood samples, and therefore, if that's the case, then consider it as a single event. Timeline of reportable events in Canada. 10 calendar days that include Saturday, Sundays, well, regarding instance, but near instant, then that's the 30 calendar days. Well, here, please note that regarding preliminary report for an instance occurring outside Canada, the preferred term is as soon as possible after. As soon as possible, that means within 24 hours after your decision. Now, mandatory medical problem reporting form in Canada is here. Is it manufacturer, importer, and then you provide some information. Is it preliminary, update, final, preliminary, and final? When you report your adverse event to Health Canada, in your documentation, I recommend you use the same language. Why don't we use the same language and terms that the regulatory agency uses? Because it is their language, and it's one of the best way to level the playing field by using the same language. For example, in your report, when you submit, you can check it here, but in your attachment, you can say that, addendum or attachment or additional information to our preliminary report. Oh, this is our preliminary or our update or our final report, whatever. Just my point is, please try to use the same language and terms that you found in the actual form. The mandatory medical device problem reporting form is continued. Is a 10-day, 30-day Canadian, foreign country, and then the information here. Again, details of instance. I want to make sure again that when you have a lot of product outside, U.S., Canada, and EU, when you describe the event, I recommend the event description be consistent. So mandatory device problem reporting form is continued here. You provide additional information and also investigative action and timeline. Well, when we talk about in U.S., there is a manufacturer evaluation method, and then manufacturer the evaluation results and conclusions, and I share the FDA code, And if you follow that code, filing adverse event reporting to Health Canada in EU, it just becomes very easy and consistent, and it's just systematically done. It can be systematically done. It's very easy. And Canadian form is continued here. Some information. Now let's move to United States applicable statutes. Well, here's the MDR, recall, corrective, and correction and removals. But please note the MDR, the section of the Food and Drug and Cosmetic Act, FDNC Act sections are listed here, and then corresponding sections from the Title 21 United States Code are listed here. Please note the FDNC Act section that are applicable to medical device reporting are similar to those, well, identical to those correction and removal. Well, when we are obligated to comply with the same statutes, why do we have to report separately? Well, you need to realize that if you report MDR for the same event, you are exempt for correction and removal. However, if you report correction and removal to FDA, you are still required to submit MDR if it's reportable under MDR provisions. And I stated that the correction and removal is part of recalls. Now let's look at applicable regulation. Medical device reporting. The Title 21 Code of Federal Regulation, Part 803, that's medical device reporting. But when we say, well, sometimes we say MDR just refer to this, and also sometimes we say MDR that reporting to the report. Well, in fact, under 21 CFR Section 803.3, MDR is defined as medical device report. Now, what's the purpose of the medical device reporting in the U.S.? Please note the language to protect the public health by helping to ensure devices are not adulterated or misbranded. Well, the term adulterated, basically the devices are manufactured bad, and misbranding, basically the information is false or misleading. So basically misbranding, it talks about information, not accurate information. The adulteration, it means your product quality. Well, if there is a lot of events and problems and you receive complaints from the patients, obviously there is a problem with the device. And also, there isn't a lot of events that doctors don't understand your IFU and they just, follow the procedure where they claim that they follow the procedure, but the way how they do, it's not consistent with IFU. Well, then there's a problem, right? So in the U.S., the purpose is written in a different way. It's in a bigger tone. So now let's look at requirement under 21 CFR Part 803, requirement as a device user facility, manufacturer or importer or distributor. Well, for example, user facility, they are required to report death or serious injury that a device has or may have caused or contributed to. Well, we are going to review the term again, just to make sure that when you decide not to report, that you want to make sure you use the language here. As a manufacturer, you are required to report death or serious injury your device has or may have caused or contributed to, and certain device malfunction, and you are required to establish, maintain adverse event files. Now, as for user facilities, well, user facility regarding death, they use this form, report to FDA and manufacturer within 10 working days. If they don't, that's citable as part of during FDA inspection 483, and then that could lead to FDA warning letter. User facility serious injury, the same form, they are required to report to manufacturer or FDA if manufacturer is unknown, and then within 10 working days, and also annual report. Now, I'd like to talk about requirements when you try to establish and maintain written MDR procedures. Well, the term establishment within the meaning and scope of follow system regulation, it means you define, document, and implement. That's the term. So when we say we have established procedure, then you should be able to show a document that it clearly defines and it clearly documents what you're doing, and it clearly implements it. And when you show the document should have the date of effective date, and who authorized it, who reviewed it, and revision history. Sometimes none of those information is available. It's a blank form, but you cannot say we have implemented because there's no date, there's no one who signed, right? So now, as for a user, facility, importer, or manufacturer, you should have internal system. Please note, it is a system. System means there are more than two components that are interconnected. That means you should have a timely and effective identification of the problems, communicate, evaluate of every event, determine whether an event is subject to medical device reporting requirements. And also you should have standardized review process. Each and every time is the same, leads to consistent determination and results. You're not going to flip bend and bet about the events anytime. For example, I was in a report in a company for the same kind of event, and 3 times when they justify, it's all different. It's all different for the same event. You don't want to do that. It has to be based on standard review process. Come up with the same decision unless you determine to improve or do in a different way. But at least my point is you need to have a standard review process, and also timely transmission of complete your medical device report to the manufacturers as a user facility or manufacturer to the FDA. And documentation and record keeping. It is not just documentation. It has to be adequate and sufficient documentation. So record keeping, not just record keeping, it has to be adequate record keeping. What I mean by that is the information that you have in your documentation, it has to be evaluated, and also to determine if an event is reportable. So basically, you should have what information that was used for evaluation and determine if an event was reportable, and also all medical device report information submitted to manufacturer as a user facility or as a manufacturer to FDA. So basically, you need to have a system, internal system. And also in that system, in your procedure, you should mention that you should allow the FDA inspectors to access to all information timely. And also when you make a determination, you have to leave a record who made the final determination. A lot of companies have manager determine the outcome. A lot of companies, the VP or CEO makes a determination and then have the manager sign it as if he or she determined. Well, if there is a litigation, everything comes out. That could be even more problematic. And I recommend that the person who actually made a determination should be there. Now, what is reportable in the U.S.? Well, for user facility, an event that a device has or may have caused or contributed to. This is a big term. This is a very broad term. If a patient uses your device and experience some instance, even if you may believe that our device has nothing to do anything with that event whatsoever, well, even if that's the case, that falls under this definition. So you need to have a criteria. Well, let's move on and then talk about it a little later. Or event that manufacturer or importers become aware that reasonably suggests that one of their marketed devices may have caused or contributed to or has malfunctioned. Well, may have caused or contributed to what? Death or serious injury. Well, what does serious injury mean? Well, death is very clear. There is a body, right? So serious injury is an injury or illness that's life-threatening, that results in permanent impairment of their body function, necessitate medical surgical intervention that preclude permanent impairment of the body function. Well, this is a very interesting language that people interpret very differently. For example, life-threatening. Well, our event, it's not believed to be life-threatening. Well, let's say there is a patient who is diabetic, and she or he put her finger with a lancet to get 1 drop of blood for blood sugar glucose testing. Now, that patient claimed, after I poked the finger and took 1 drop of blood, I got infection. I had to use triple antibiotics to treat my finger. Well, you may feel that's laughable, but for the purpose of medical device reporting, question is it reportable? The answer is yes or no. Some company may say that's not reportable because that's not life-threatening and that's not permanent impairment and that doesn't necessitate medical or surgical intervention to preclude permanent impairment. Well, guess what? What if the patient is a hemophiliac? When he or she, even put a finger to get a 1 drop of blood, and then if there is a little infection, her bleeding or his bleeding may not stop. Well, obviously I'm a little bit exaggerating here, but my point is, question is, does this fall under serious injury? I think that depending upon the situation, I believe it falls because it necessitated medical intervention. If that person was me, I had to use triple antibiotics. What if this infection got serious and I had to amputate all of my fingers or one of my fingers? Well, that's obviously permanent impairment of my body function, my fingers. If you come up with this kind of logic, clearly it's reportable. But in your company, the criteria when you establish it, is it reportable? You decide. Now, under 21 CFR 803.3 definition, become aware is pretty straightforward. But as for manufacturing, when any of your employees become aware of a reportable event, that's required to report it within 30 days. That's required to report it within 5 days when FDA requests information or when you are going to take remedial action. Well, basically, become aware, it means any of your employees that you are required to report has acquired information that reasonably suggests. But please note here, the source of information, any information. Telephone, email, or even, when you went to a coffee shop to meet a friend, but you bump into somebody and complaining about your product. Well, yeah. Now, definition, cause or contributed to. Well, this is a very important term that I want to make sure you interpret the same way as I do. That means as FDA do. For example, cause or contributed to. Let's say your device was or may have been a factor in death or serious injury. Well, a patient was using your device and somehow experienced adverse event. You may conclude later that it has nothing to do with our device. But still you are required because that falls under this language. Your device was or may have been a factor. So basically, even if your investigation shows that your device has nothing to do with this event whatsoever, you are still required because you fall under this definition. So 5-day report, use this form and manufacturer definition and malfunction. Well, basically, malfunction is a failure of your device to meet its performance as intended. Now, this is an important term that I've seen a lot of companies don't use it, but I recommend you use it because when you use these terms and the key terms, then you can make your reporting in EU and Health Canada in a systematic, integrated way. It just becomes easy because you are using the same term, same language over and over for the same or similar event. Now, device problem, for example, our device problem, what happened was device display error message, well, FDA 2591. Oh, the prompt will not clear. When there is an error message and we try to remove it and the prompt didn't disappear. Now we had a problem with the computer software, FDA 1112. Patient problem code, medical problem. Well, patient got an infection, FDA 1930. Well, patient got a bacterial infection, FDA 1745. So now this is the MDR event problem code for device problem, patient problem. This problem code need to be used when user facility file their report to the manufacturer or FDA. The medical device evaluation code, this is for manufacturers. Again, I recommend you use this term because it can describe the event very well. Manufacturer evaluation, what method, how did you evaluate an event? Well, we used the actual device evaluated. However, we were not able to recover the actual device of the incident. And then your actual device not evaluated, FDA 3263. Well, when we evaluate what kind of results have we obtained, well, we obtained the results based on our evaluation that biological problem has occurred. There's a contamination. And also there is an electrical problem, FDA 120. Well, there is an open circuit problem, FDA 122. Today's medical device law from MHRA in UK regarding oximeter that I talk about, and also the yesterday another company reported for safety notice. It was a drug pumping device. One of the events they talk about electrical short circuit. So it happens. So FDA evaluation method code, results code, conclusion code are really important for you to use for your maximum benefit. For example, after you evaluate and get results, and when you conclude, you may conclude, well, not yet available. We are still evaluating. If that's the case, in your MDR report, put FDA 11. Well, we have determined that it was concluded that there is a human factor issue, FDA 19. Well, it was determined that the patient or doctors failed to follow instructions, FDA 18, like that. Now, this is the FDA form, mandatory reporting form. Here's the manufacturer number, report number. Please note, here is the A, B, C, D. You can call it as Section A or Block A. Both terms are interchangeably used. But for today's webinar, let's use Section A. For example, Section A, patient information. Under Section A, there is a number 1, Section A1, patient identifier. Below it says in confidence. That means you don't give the actual name of the patient. You do not provide the patient's social security number. You provide just any coding system that can identify the patient, not social security number, not actual name. And then here's the other information. Under outcome attributed to adverse event, you provide here. Again, under Section B5 describe event or problem. This is a very contentious area between regulatory affairs, quality, and senior management. But again, the whole point is when you report, you want to report in a consistent manner. For example, if there is a potential litigation 2 years down the road, you have to disclose entire document. Now you see what language should be included. And if there is a suspect product, you list, and suspect medical device, you list here. Now let me explain how to fill out the form. Read general instruction. This is important. All entry type or printed in a font no smaller than 8. Complete all sections that apply. A lot of companies just fill out a couple of sections, especially B, device description or event description, and then nothing else. But I recommend you try to fill out the form because what if it has to be disclosed by court order? You did not provide any information that might be damaging. So they should be entered this format, and then And then for narrative entries, attach additional pages if you need. FDA recommend you actually use the text from the person who complained. Well, if that text is so inflammatory and if you cannot use it, well, when you paraphrase it, but try to stay within the meaning and scope of the original text, even if you can soften it not to be inflammatory. Well, if no suspect medical device involved, then you can substitute this section. And manufacturer report, you use the way how I explain here, and user facility report, you use 10-digit, for example, CMS number, and then EO number like that as shown here. Now, Form FDA 3500 asks for the following information. Well, we've seen the form briefly, but just to make sure that we understand. Well, this event and problem code is straightforward. It can be easily followed. But again, describe event or problem. And please note that the section H is about device manufacturers only. So manufacturer have to fill out the section here. And regarding section F for use by user facility, there is a section about event problem code, patient code, and device problem code, and up to 3, and you can provide up to 3, and if you need more, then you need to attach. When you attach it, you need to use your user facility report number at the top, the right-hand corner. It's all described in the general instruction. Now, device manufacturers, I want to make sure that we are on the same page, that type of reportable event, death, or serious injury. Let me make one simple suggestion here that's frequently mistakenly believed. Let's say a doctor in an office starts using your device, and in 10 minutes, the operation will begin, and patient needs to be administered with the anesthesia. And he or she got anesthesia because he or she will be performed for a surgery. And then after the doctor began to perform a surgery, 30 minutes later, device stopped. Now, when you report that, well, obviously it's a device malfunction. Question is serious injury. And I've seen a company that report the administration of anesthesia itself as a serious injury. Now, please, let's use our common sense. The doctor was just following instruction for use. 10 minutes before, 20 minutes after, whatever. He was just following the instruction for use. Question is, machine, the device suddenly stopped in the middle of the operation. Question is, do you have to report each and every step as an instance? Well, I've seen a company doing that. You don't have to do that. But you want to make sure you establish your own criteria based on your evaluation internally. But when you do that, please use the FDA's product code, and then under that product code, there is a serious adverse events that are reported, especially if you go to total product life cycle database, and use it based on that. And also the code that I talk about, patient problem code and device problem code, that's where you want to base your reporting criteria. And device evaluated by manufacturer, now return, yes, evaluation, summary attached, things like that, you need to provide a code. And also evaluation code for evaluation method code, results code, conclusion code, up to 4. If you need more, then attach it. And this is a great information that you want to use. Well, for illustrative purposes, I like to share one case. For example, product code FMK and the Lancet case, brand name EcoCheck. Now, event occurred June 5, and then the event type malfunction, and then report description here. It says, report alleged that needle from the multi-click Lancet device protrude outside the end of cap. Well, this is what the manufacturer described. Also, manufacturer provided narrative. It was unknown if the initial report was sent report to the FDA. Well, I think that sometimes when you receive a report, you want to call at least once and send an email, at least two ways of communication, either by email or either by fax or by two times a phone call. I think that would be reasonable instead of just saying that it was unknown. And I recommend that you describe, you attempted to contact and it was unknown, whatever. Now, where to submit medical device report? Well, here's the address. Now, let me make sure the requirement that you understand. Even though we talk about it, I want to make sure one thing. Well, we talk about timely, effective identification, communication, and evaluation of the event, a standardized way, and you need to have a internal system. But when you do that, again, I repeat, please do not combine languages, because if you combine languages between EU, Health Canada, and US requirements, you may lead to confusion, and then you may get cited for A3 for your failure to meet the US MDR requirements. And the requirement in the MDR procedure is stated here. When I say timely submission, we talk about 5 days, 30 days, 10 days, depending upon which criteria that we talk about. You want to make sure the timing is critical. So Maudi, let me share one case. The Maudi is a manufacturer and user facility device experience database. For example, between June 1st, 2012, June 30, 2012, there are 536 death reports. And then between June 28 and 9, there is this 90 death report. But please note here that a lot of some report, like 47 report, no answer provided. So when company submit their report, they don't provide the information they could have provided. The point is, as far as the adverse event reporting is concerned, please be on time. This is very important. When you look at FDA warning letter database, you see a lot of companies get 483 and later warning letters simply for failure to meet their timeline. Conclusion, I recommend you must establish and maintain the applicable procedures, and procedure must address all applicable requirements set forth in the applicable regulation, and not just documentation. Documentation has to be adequate in a systematic, integrated manner. And I recommend companion approaches in your procedure. For example, in your MDR procedure, you may want to attach the complaint handling procedure and even CAPA procedure, or field safety notice actual form attached all together, so that when you read it, you get all the other related, closely related forms together. And compliance and compliance and compliance. When you try to establish and maintain the procedures, please do it in a KISS way. Keep it simple and sustainable. And when you need help, I recommend you seek help, and regulatory doctor, we provide practical, actionable, and sustainable solution in an integrated, thorough manner. We call it tacit manner. There's a reference for the U.S. requirement, and I recommend you look for or use the TPLC database. That's where you can develop your the MDR criteria, because under each product code you can see what kind of events that have been reported for the past many years. Well, with this, this concludes my webinar presentation. To open Q&A session, I'd like to turn over the mic to today's webinar host, Global Compliance Panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David. It was a wonderful presentation, and I thank all the participants for cooperating with us. As David said, it is time for the Q&A to begin, and we request all who have questions for our presenter to click on the raise hand option, which is a palm-like icon at the bottom of your participants panel, to ask your questions verbally, so that I can unmute your line and you can talk to the presenter directly. Or post your questions in the Q&A panel, and our presenter will read it out loud and then answer. For any reason, if you're unable to ask your question using either of the two means I mentioned, please share it with me by chat and I shall pass it on to a presenter to answer them. Meanwhile, we sincerely request you to share your feedback in the feedback form that has appeared on the screen in the polling panel right now. This feedback form has just 8 questions, mostly multiple choice in nature, and it wouldn't take more than 2 minutes of time to answer. The polling will remain open till the end of session, and you can answer it even after the Q&A is over. We would be grateful if you could stay back a little longer and complete this feedback for us. The attendees on the screen, you can see the upcoming webinars of Dr. Lim. If you'd like to take part in any of these webinars, please log on to our website www.globalcompliancepanel.com and you can register yourself to take part in any of these webinars. Also, we have the past webinars of Dr. Lim, which are available in the recorded format, including today's. And to purchase this, please log on to our website. And to know more webinars of Global Compliance Panel and Dr. Lim, please follow the link mentioned on the screen. David, I do not see any questions coming up from the attendees. Shall we give another 30 seconds for them to ask questions?
Sure.
Thank you. And meanwhile, David, do you have any message to the attendees or any concluding remarks?
Sure. Well, even if our seminar will be over in some 30 seconds, if you do have any questions, you are welcome to contact Global Compliance Panel so that they can refer the questions to me, then I will address very shortly. Again, thank you very much for participating in this webinar, which is one of my most favorite topics, and I hope you enjoyed it. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David. As David said, if you are not able to ask a question now, and if you get any questions about this webinar at any point of time, please feel free to write us an email to webinars@globalcompliancepanel.com, and we'll get the answer from the presenter and we'll reply to you as soon as possible. With this, we are moved to the end of this session. We are grateful to all of you for having taken part in this webinar. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can send us an email to webinars@globalcompliancepanel.com. If anyone of you feel that your team member or friends or colleagues might benefit from this webinar, we are happy to inform you that this webinar will be available in the recorded format and can be purchased from our website, or you can call us at 800-447-9407. Welcome your suggestions and feedback or ideas on how we can improve our webinars. If you'd like to suggest a topic or desire a customized corporate training, we ensure that whatever is your training necessity, it will be our priority. On behalf of our presenter, Dr. Lim, and the Global Compliance Panel team, I would like to say thank you for participating in this webinar, and we wish you a great day ahead. Thank you. Thank you very much, David.
Thank you.
You're welcome, David.